Thank you everyone for coming on a rainy day. I've heard so much about the Atlas Institute for years and years because a former graduate student of mine, LD Lasra, who just got her PhD and graduated, or is about to graduate at the end of fall quarter, has told me wonderful things. So it's such a treat. Thank you, Ellen, for hosting this talk. And today I'm going to talk about circular futures, prototyping through eco-materials and digital fabrication. I'm an associate professor at the University of California, Davis, and I work in a lab called Circular Futures Lab. I also manage, I'm the director of the UC Davis department Makerspace. So when I was hired to start an industrial design program with a focus in sustainability, I was also given this like huge open space, and actually LD worked with me to help set up the Makerspace that has digital fabrication, metal shop, wood shop, open space. So it was like a real dream, kind of like touch the sun, early junior academic moment. And I've had wonderful staff to work with and faculty at the design department at UC Davis. We're 700 undergrad and 20 graduate students. We have an MFA in design, and my students make fantastic eco prototypes using our Makerspace facility. I teach industrial design and sustainable design. And through kind of digital fabrication and teaching both graduate students who are often my TAs and doing research. We've done fantastic projects like 3D printed shoes made with fish leather, upcycled street sign furniture, things like Diego just finished an agave machine that takes the pulp off agave fibers. Alejandra Roos just finished a project doing upcycled jeans and adding tapioca and contributing to our eco material library, which I will talk about soon. So eco materials, as a designer with a focus in sustainability, I've been fascinated in how to kind of make my own materials, as well as think about upcycling and biofabrication. So having a kind of a future thinking makerspace is a great place to have a display of all the student prototypes happening. So when LD was a student, gosh, I think like 7 years ago, she came to me and said she wanted to write her first grant. So UC Davis has they have a sustainability grant called the Green Fund. So we wrote a grant together to fund the Eco Materials Library prototype. So we received $20,000 to do that and opened up a space in our makerspace to kind of exhibit pieces. And just the start of this project inspired many students over the years to participate. And just last year, we won the International Makerspace Conference Best Paper Award, kind of documenting how to make your own paper, or how to make your own material library. So the project was also exhibited at the Pioneering Biomaterials exhibition at the University of California, at California College of the Arts just last year. So as folks are probably aware here at Atlas, sustainable materials are really becoming a great way for both design students, industrial design students, scientists, material scientists, and engineers to kind of overlap and collaborate. So when we have kind of been iterating over the years, the material library, we've come up with categories like fungal, animal-based, mineral, microbial, plant-based, recycled materials, and kind of defining what these different categories can be for our own material library, as well as the kind of consulting we're doing for other material libraries. LD has helped with the kind of grants that we've gotten to put eco kind of material lab equipment together. Things like a lot of things are kind of common kitchen devices, like industrial Vitamix blenders, dehydrators, coffee. You can do a lot with just a coffee grinder and grinding up things like pistachio nuts, scales. So we kind of try to make it more accessible for people wanting to put their own, either small scale or more industrial scale biomaterial kind of wet lab together. And then we've also kind of helped go through so many of the open source recipes to make some of these often food scraps like eggshells and orange peels and banana peels, but also kind of getting out into our own courtyard to look for things. We've been grinding up prickly pear cactuses and throwing that in with eggshells, and students have been coming up with some great combinations. But things like gelatin, agar-agar, and glycerin are kind of great binders to make these materials last a long time. Maybe people are familiar with kombucha, drinking or making their own kombucha. The SCOBY, this one has been growing for, I think it grew for like maybe 6 months and got really thick. But something I find really interesting about the material library is to be able to get textures. We 3D printed pieces to make texture, or even pushing the SCOBY into a basket to get this kind of chevron relief. So the eco materials are a great way to explore digital fabrication and kind of get away with just normal plastics that are often what you find in a makerspace. So through the Makerspace conference, we've been publishing more papers on sustainability in makerspaces. So working with my graduate students and undergrad students, we've been coming up with label systems, as well as identifying what materials can be compostable, 3D printed, pressed, mold, laser cut, through many tests. So this has been a really fun part of both categorizing and also seeing what's possible with these materials. This is a project submitted by Alejandra Rus, who was exploring upcycled jeans. So she used our Vitamix blender to blend up jeans and added tapioca and glycerin and all kinds of materials, and came up with some very beautiful samples that she submitted to the material library. So this is a new project announcement. LD received the Sustainable CU Grant Award last year for an eco-material library for the Atlas Institute. So we've been working this week on coming up with the kind of design of the shelf system, and so to be continued. So if people are interested in supporting LD in this new endeavor, please talk to her.
We need more.
More hands. We're kind of working on the display, but I think there'll be workshops for actually making materials. And if you have your own materials to contribute, we'd love to have them be 4 by 6 inches, and kind of coming up with some of those new label systems. So it's a real fun way to kind of see this project grow. Over the summer, I worked at Haystack Mountain School of Crafts in their Fab Lab and was a resident there, and actually my residency followed Fiona Bell's residency, who's also an alum of Atlas. And we both kind of contributing to a material library for this craft school. So I'm really, just so excited to see how material libraries can grow, but have a focus in sustainability. There's material libraries, at many research institutions, but really pushing the possibility of sustainable materials, as well as kind of DIY materials. My graduate students have really kind of emphasized the materials don't have to come from like third-party companies. They can really come from students. So I was just at Anderson Ranch. I see Emil here, who's the director of the Fab Lab at Anderson Ranch outside of Aspen in Snowmass. And I just took a mold making class where we used Rhino and 3D printing and poured silicone molds, which was a ton of fun. So future material library projects, I want to kind of add this curriculum, the mold making curriculum. When I was at Haystack Mountain, they had a lobster bake with 100 people. So I harvested all the extra lobster shells and added a couple different ingredients to kind of get these lobster shell composites. And I'm working on kind of tiling composites. As also at Haystack, I was able to do a project called hybrid weaving, where I learned techniques in dyeing, natural reed weaving material with cochineal, which is a bug that's often found in Mexico, to dye the reed. And then I've been kind of developing a 3D printed system for basket making. So 3D printing kind of allows new forms in basket making to kind of be a little more exploratory, not the kind of traditional like apple basket that we know. So I've been enjoying having access to digital fabrication and kind of exploring how these forms can change and kind of unexpected ways and kind of new form making that could, be larger scale in architecture or, smaller scale. So I'm having a lot of fun, also collaborating with basket makers to learn chevron weaving techniques, but I'm able to get some of these shapes with 3D printing rings. So that's something I've been teaching in my own industrial design class. I've been doing lampshade design with my students with 3D printing, but I wanted to get away from so much plastic. So bringing in the natural materials has actually been really inspiring to the students. And when students are weaving, the room becomes very quiet. It's almost like a retirement home, and we're just like really like So I think students are also just as hungry for sustainable materials. So it's been great to kind of also go to craft schools and find ways of bringing traditional craft in with digital fabrication, so that we can kind of hybrid these materials and figure out ways of kind of exploring. So tools are something that's really informed my practice, and I have a project I've done for a few years with Sarah Dean, who's a professor at the University of Michigan, who's just starting a new MDes program at the STEM School of Michigan. We have a project called Tools for a Warming Planet that we've brought to Dutch Design Week, Ars Electronica, and Isaiah, the Art, Design, and Technology Conference. The project has categorized tools that are adapting to a warming planet. So many of my projects, you can see kind of going through this categorization process, whether it's a material library or future thinking tools. So health and security, community and care, tool like food systems, energy, data communication are all part of, I think, kind of prototyping tools that can adapt to a warming planet. We've crowdsourced this project and had over 150 submissions from projects all around the world related to kind of adapting to a warming planet. So I've featured not only my own students, but a lot of international projects. This was ours, this was at Isaiah, in Art Santa Monica in Barcelona, that hosted the conference exhibition. So participating in exhibitions in conferences is a lot of fun. From being in this competition or exhibition, we got invited, other curators came and invited us to Dutch Design Week and Ars Electronica, and we've now been doing some different museums. We're in a show right now in Portugal that kind of came from this exhibition. So we have QR codes of all the kind of websites of the projects that have been submitted. We also have hands-on prototypes. So you can see the kids kind of bombing the crickets that are kind of cricket chocolate. So this summer we prototyped the project as a public engagement at the Exploratorium Museum, which is a great museum that has kind of like hands-on science, kind of exploratory work, and their idea is phenomena. So not just like, you know, a 4-page description of the exhibit, but just kind of simple arrows and having people really kind of touch and move things around. So their exhibitions or like their pieces get like a lot of like hands-on kids of all ages. So one of my graduate students brought a project called the Clay Air Cooler, which is a 3D printed prototype that has a small fan and it sits in water. That was like a PLA printed device, and it cools as a personal cooler. So people were able to put their hand over the cooler and feel cool air. So these kinds of simple prototypes that come from a makerspace prototyping lab is a great way to bring those objects out and have the public feel like test them. We also had a table set up for the month in August at the Exploratorium for people to kind of make postcard size nominations of future prototypes that they'd like to see. So the project has been a lot of fun. So I'll take you through a few of the prototypes that are in the collection. We're now putting a database together that has over 200 projects. So when you're in the database, we're going to be launching soon. You can search for health or materials and see the different projects that pop up from all over the world. So Seema was a graduate student and a jeweler that was in our MFA program, and her thesis project was body cooling jewelry. So she had incredible jewelry skills and kind of soldered up these cooling pieces, and she did research on where the body needs to cool. So having the kind of cooling air, cooling water go through the jewelry helped cool the body, and she did research on that device. You know, she was thinking this is for 2050, but I think we're ready, right? Some of our summers, I would wear cooling jewelry. It's like, so you know, some of these ideas feel very speculative, but you know, they can be ready to go into practice right away. So food systems is a part of the project. An architect from San Francisco who's from Mexico, Monica Martinez, submitted a project called lime chili crickets with pumpkin seeds. So this kind of many cultures from around the world have had insects be part of the diet and like additional protein, and it can be a great alternative to cattle that are part of deforestation in the Amazon. So thinking about lower impact protein has been some of the submissions to this project. This project is a bit more speculative, but design studio in Barcelona called Domingo Club has come up with simple devices to make your own tempeh, and even have this kind of speculative jewelry where your body heats up the different beans and makes tempeh with your body heat. So that's a 3D printed device, and then it has a glass jar. So these kinds of objects, I think, were kind of great contributions to the collection. We've worked with a designer, an artist, a kind of a community activist, Marina, in Barcelona, and part of the exhibition, we did this big community meal where folks that have been working in the sustainable foods systems in Barcelona kind of all did like a round robin and talked about their projects, which was a lot of fun. So finding ways to both work in museums but engage the community is a great way to kind of unpack some of the mysteries of resiliency and thinking about going forward with sustainability. So data and communication may be a good fit for the Atlas Institute. Sarah and I have a project called Emergy. These are emojis for climate change, and we've done a lot of research on how a lot of communication happens through emojis, right? And if you can hashtag earthquake, if it was a picture, then it might be easier to kind of like time reference when an earthquake happened. There was just an earthquake yesterday in San Francisco. So these are kind of issues, flooding, landslides that are like very much happening. Forest fires, I know in Colorado and California, you guys are also dealing with them. Yes.
Are these published somewhere?
We have exhibited them at many places. We've made a sticker, an Apple sticker kind of app, but we're kind of in the process of like bringing the project back into the world. We have nominated the project many times to the kind of like forgetting their name, the governing body of emojis. It exists, like an official name, and you can nominate the yoga emoji or many emojis. Unicode is the name. So imagine like one seat at the table of like Facebook, Twitter, like everyone's got a spot, and then they go through a nominated emojis and say yes or no. But even the last 5 years, climate change was too contentious. And now can you imagine to try to push a climate change emoji? So we also have kind of looked at how people are hacking, like, the fire, and then a tree is kind of like forest fire. But we're persistent. And the project was just nominated for an award, so hopefully we'll get some more attention. But, we're in a really strange time with, just a few years ago, it felt like we all acknowledged climate change was happening. And now I just feel like we're rolling back, hundreds of years in many ways. So it's a pretty wild time. But I think really important for artists to kind of be doing these projects to put these ideas out into the world, where it feels like not so subversive, or but maybe all of a sudden it is again. So does that answer your question?
Yeah, they're just really beautiful illustrations, and they're so clear. I mean, it's hard to make them. You get it immediately. It's just really good icon.
Yeah. This is a project that it's kind of like the most when I show my work, the most like showstopper of people are like, wait, what? We need emojis. So yeah, so
Emojis.
so there's a website, emergy.org, where we're kind of updating the project, and we put the applications to Unicode. They're like 20 pages long, and you have to prove that that forest fires are happening, or you have to also say like, maybe this would be used for like a cool party. Like you have to say that your emoji, like this could be flooding or like a pool party. You have to say that it would be used in 8 different ways. So yeah, Unicode is really fascinating. But think about, how I've been looking at like ancient ways of communicating with symbols, and even Mexico City, the subway system has these beautiful symbols that are part of communicating how to get from A to B if you're not, if you don't necessarily read Spanish or using the symbols. So I think pictographs are really fascinating, and we're actually working on some more like academic publications on this project, kind of relating it to how like historically people have communicated visually. But I think as we're thinking about climate crisis or just environmental crisis, is that emojis have a big place in that communication and can help bridge languages across borders. So
I love that they're colorful and vector graphics. I mean, so much icon design is done as kind of this flat, linear, blah, 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 icon stuff. And it feels kind of 15 years ago, which I love about it. It's
yeah.
just
Yeah, we worked
Yeah,
with,
it's good.
this project is almost 10 years old, so we did work with a wonderful graphic design student at California College of Art to help us with it. His name was Bo, and he's on our website. But in the Unicode process, you do have to kind of like, we have to make like a black and white option, and you do have to kind of go through these pictographs and how it could work at different interfaces, whether it's Apple or Google, the icons they're all a little different actually. So you can go through a real deep dive learning about emojis, but submit your own emoji. It's great to see the new ones. There's some great podcasts about the dumpling emoji. There's a group called Emoji Nation, and they kind of explain the process. So some things like dumplings have had, they've gone much faster than our emojis, but we haven't, we still persist. Another great, like, more digital project is called iNaturalist. If people have the iNaturalist app, we're interested in how are we documenting things like, algae blooms and die outs. So a couple years ago, there was a big algae bloom where a lot of dead fish were kind of turning up around the Bay Area, and citizen scientists were documenting where they were finding the fish, geolocated, pinning them through the iNaturalist app, and kind of helped with figure out where is this algae bloom coming from, and can like play a quicker role than like, okay, we'll write a grant and hire scientists, and in 8 months we'll figure out where the algae bloom started. But I think there's a real role for citizen scientists to like quickly get out and help kind of peel back some of these unintended maybe like too much concentration of fertilizer, or like a leak in a system, to help stop it and reduce some of the harm. Ecology and life is one of the other topics. This is Ophelia Veloce, one of our graduate students, and she made a project called The Living Sink. She's a Peruvian architect and designer, and was interested after the pandemic of what are some simpler ways of cleaning water to like have hand cleaning be more possible. And she clay 3D printed with a wood pulp these water filtration systems so that they're able to filter water. And she studied what aquatic plants would also help filter water. And this is a recycled soy sauce tote. So she upcycled this kind of water vessel and did research on the plants, and kind of fabricated with steel this kind of almost sculptural structure. So having these objects, we had this in our courtyard for many years, kind of making spaces for these objects to exist. So beyond the material library wall, but how can we put some of these prototypes into the world? This was a 1-year project I participated in called Resilient by Design. It was a project funded by the Rockefeller Foundation after Rebuild by Design. Rebuild by Design was based in New York City post Hurricane Sandy, and funded multi-million-dollar projects to help make Manhattan more resilient. And then the Bay Area wanted to do this design competition before a big flood, so that we could get in front of some of the lower the projects in most need, kind of on the front line. So this is Alameda Creek, and it's the Army Corps of Engineers re-channeled the creek. Instead of being like a beautiful meandering river, made it just straight, to help reduce flooding in Union City and Fremont. But because of that, they kind of scraped away all living ecology. And what we learned from this project is things like marshes, the kind of resilient ecological infrastructure. When there's a flood, if you have kind of just rocks in an open space, the flood pours into the neighborhood. But if you have a living marsh, that's a sponge that would kind of take the kind of wave attenuation and stop the waves and soak up that water. So it's actually a resilient infrastructure using ecology. So that's like something I'm very inspired about like going forward. We work with Scape Landscape Architecture. Kate Orff is the director. She's won the MacArthur Genius Award, and for good reason of really using ecology as infrastructure. So what we're learning is you can't just build a wall and think that's going to keep the water out. Water, it can come from the backyard. It can like inundate from the soil. So there's kind of no wall that's going to prevent our major coastal cities from water inundation during sunny day floods. It can be floods in all different types of weather. So this project really explored how sediment, how mud can be part of the infrastructure, and was a lot of fun to collaborate with. After that project, I worked with folks that had this idea of living data pod that collected water samples. You can see the little green dot from a very kind of DIY water sampling technology is plastic. So we worked with kids as well as kind of the Planktoscope project that has come out of Stanford to have under $1,000 water sampling systems, and all the water that's sampled through their microscope is then put in a big database so you can start to look at global water quality in new ways. So how am I doing for time? Good, fine, okay. So I'm gonna kind of go back in time. So before I kind of got to Davis, my own MFA project was in solar micromobility. So I started doing solar charging station projects and was kind of living in Austin, Texas, and just so overwhelmed by how many of our US cities once had beautiful light rail, and then the light rail was like dug out when conglomerate groups like Standard Oil and Greyhound and many of our car manufacturing companies got together and said, wouldn't it be better if we didn't have light rail or public transit and we had automobiles? So a lot of cities just, highways were dropped in. Many highways, especially in Austin, divided neighborhoods, communities of color were more isolated from working in school areas. So some of our highways have done horrible things in the United States. So I'm kind of curious, like, how can we get back that land? I found out that Los Angeles, 50% of the land in Los Angeles dedicated to the automobile. Parking, highways, just nightmare, right? So in places where, we have housing shortages and could need like more green space, I think there's an opportunity to kind of rethink about this land. But it's very hard to kind of put light rail back into cities. The highways have kind of taken over with these like 8-lane highways. And then we have these graveyards of automobiles. So that was kind of the start of my graduate thesis work on solar charging stations for electric bikes and scooters. I received a commission from Austin Energy to do their electric drive kiosks. So this is to charge electric scooters, and it's part of their kind of electric drive DC fast charging. This project was launched in 2016. So my studio, Soul Design Lab, did the industrial design of the kiosk. Here's the finished kiosk. We fabricated the project using digital fabrication. The kind of shade roof is using a water jet cutter. So we designed the structure in Rhino and then worked with Lighthouse Solar to do the solar installation. But part of kind of the public art of this is using a 1950s gas pump that tells you how much energy is kind of in the project. You can see this is the charge bar. So there's Concord Sun Extender batteries. So this project is off grid. We didn't connect to the public utility line. So if the power goes out in Austin, you could go to the electric drive and charge up your phone or electric bike. So that's part of kind of my early prototyping and resiliency, but having something be large scale. And this is at the former Seahome power plant that's been decommissioned. So it was kind of like a dream project where I was like, you're gonna let me do what? So the project won the Austin Green Award. And then, this is like Mayor Adler speaking at the launch of the electric drive. So we have to really think, like, this is Austin, Texas, right? So you wouldn't really think about Austin, Texas being forward thinking. With Austin Energy as a public utility, it has a huge solar and wind portfolio that's like energy being used by the city of Austin. So I think we have to keep promoting renewable energy, and even though it might feel like unheartening right now, but this was a project funded by the Office of Sustainability and Austin Energy, who wanted solar to be a big part of like a showcase in downtown Austin at an old power plant. So part of the power plant, we also helped do some signage. So that's the Seahome Eco District. So this is what welding up the signs look like. They gave us the old wheels. So these are like, hundreds of years old. So we powder coated them and you can spin them. So, the role of public art is also really, I think, exciting and bringing sustainability and future thinking mobility into action. So this project was finished in 2017. And my recent commission has been with the Bay Area Metropolitan Transportation Commission. We were awarded a mobility hub project with BART, who's the Bay Area Rapid Transit Authority. This is the MacArthur BART station in Oakland. And I was through this competition, I made this rendering to show like a mobility hub that charges electric bikes and scooters with this kind of modest solar roof. And then kind of the best part of the project was working with the transit stop map designers and helping them come up with an icon for bike share and solar charging, so it's now on the official map. And the project is right at the project, they have the Lyft electric scooters, similar to the Lime electric scooters you have here in Boulder. And the project is like, it's probably 60% done. This is the roof structure, the solar panels will go here. The battery bank is inside their kind of mobility, it's called a bike station, where a lot of the electric bikes are inside here. And then this is what's brand new about the project, and it was kind of part of my vision, is these 3 electric bike lockers. So the electricity from the solar panels go into these bike lockers. And the bike lockers have existed for many years at the transit stations. So you have a card that opens the bike locker, and then you could charge your own personal bike or scooter. So this will probably be, I think, one of the first transit stations in the US to offer personal charging. I have a graduate student that just did more research on some of the fires that happen with kind of the Franken bikes, that maybe the battery system isn't using the wrong charger. So there's a lot more research to happen related to safe charging, and even having the charger turn off if it feels hot, like a thermal event. So my lab is doing more research on micromobility and safe charging. So those are all the projects I had to share with you guys. I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you. Yes.
Out of my mind, I'm curious about all of this sustainability projects. Are they nonprofit or for profit?
So my design studio has always been nonprofit, so I've worked under nonprofit organizations, and I've been an academic for 9 years now. I just finished 9 years as a design professor at UC Davis. So I would say nonprofit, but I partner with cities. So I'm partnering with Austin Energy is a public utility. I'm partnering with BART transit authorities. I'm partnering with research institutions, so kind of through that direction. I could have taken like a left turn on many of these projects and made a for-profit company and a product. But the route I went has been more kind of site-specific projects. But I do think about bringing some projects to market in the future.
There was a comment or question some time ago on online.
You can see it.
Paul said, before I forgot, is Ecolab associated with any tribes at Burning Man?
That's a good question. I've never been to Burning Man, but I have collaborated with a public artist, Dallas Swindle, who has done many major projects at Burning Man. So partnering with him as a designer when we did the Austin Energy kiosk, his skills to do large scale steel fabrication is definitely from some like gravity defying projects, spinning orbs at Burning Man that have been in like all kinds of Rolling Stones and, you know, some fun projects. So you can see Dallas's Burning Man projects on the website, on the Soul Design Lab website. Yes.
You showed us a shoe that was printed with fish leather.
Yes.
That's a filament
Fish.
No, there's a startup in Sacramento that's actually using mahi fish leather, taking some different types of fish leather and cleaning them and treating them, and then he's been giving these samples to graduate students and researchers at UC Davis to make products with, so bags and shoes. Damian Mitchell, who's been prototyping that project, he's now a professor at the University of Louisiana, Baton Rouge, an industrial design professor, but he's been doing fantastic 3D printed soles and then using the fish leather for the top.
You mentioned a woman who did a project with a clay 3D printer.
Mhm.
You guys have a clay 3D printer? I've never seen one.
Oh, yeah. The PotterBot is a clay 3D printer. We have 2 of them in our makerspace, where LD actually was using, so you were using it a little bit. You helped when we first got it, you helped us set it up.
I think it was part of the grant, part of the equipment we got for the materials library was to get equipment, and the PotterBot is one of them.
Can we get one here?
Yes. There's
space,
actually,
we need a space, question for Zach. And also, I don't know how much more would be like, it's now, I think at the time it was like 8,000.
yeah, they're in that ballpark, but I shared with you the kind of there's a lower cost cold paste. And clay 3D printer that's more under $2,000, so it's more desktop size, that I can share with
Yeah.
LB.
And I would be also happy to share with you, Aiden, like, some resources here, like faculty or students can apply to get, if there's like related to sustainability, they can apply for small grants from 2,000, 5,000, 10, and we got like 24 for the.
Okay.
And I think Leah Buckley has the 3D Play-Doh, your own 3D printing as well. So not exactly the clay, but with kitchen material. So that's DIY too.
Yeah, the different cold paste.
Yeah.
Is the picture about enormous? It looks like it was enormous.
No,
There's different scales.
The photo.
Yeah, you can go to, the Potterbot company is in Florida and they're really nice. A lot of architecture departments around the US have set up, Potterbots, and we just got a kind of a clay mixer that extrudes the clay into a cylinder, and then you put the cylinder on this kind of, almost like a ski boot binder, and then it pushes the clay out. What I like about clay 3D printing is that, if you don't like the prototype, you can still use it for your critique and then just throw it back in the bin and extrude it again. So it's more circular. My students, they're feeling nervous about so much plastic with 3D printing. Like PLA is definitely better than ABS because it's more corn based. But I think clay is a fun way to 3D print.
Michael's lab upstairs using coffee grounds, so you can 3D print. So it's not clay, but you can have big coffee pot with made from grounded coffee.
Check it out. I'm a potter as well, so.
Yeah,
and
feel
a
free.
3D print, so.
Feel free to email me and I'll send you more info. There's tons of great projects. There's a conference called Acadia. It'll actually be in Miami in a few weeks, and it's like a ton of digital architectural clay 3D printing projects. So there's great papers from Acadia.
Thank you.
Association of Computer Aided Design
Yes.
in America, Acadia.
I went to that in Halifax and that's 7. Okay.
They still.
There's a lot.
They go.
There's some great papers. On clay
Acadia,
3D printing.
and there's Sigradi, there's
Exactly.
Icadi, there's Catria, there's ASCAD, and there's CAD Future. So there's a whole bunch of computer aided architecture design. They're all doing lots of fabrication actually.
Exactly. Yeah, they got robotic arms. They're getting more the KUKA arms. Yes.
I got a question on this topic.
Concrete.
As we're doing a lot of prototypes here in house, is there filament that's better than PLA, like in terms of environmental friendly or being compostable, that's like already available to buy?
Yeah, those companies come and go. PHA is a filament that Mango Materials has put out. Sometimes they have short runs of filament available. We've done some more work with the PHA, so it's more like a bacteria, and more like breaks down. These companies kind of come and go, so if one is available, buy it quick, try it out, and they might not stay in business forever. It's hard to kind of stay in business. But that said, I think in the maker community, people do want more sustainable filaments. So we've tested different ones. There's some that have kind of like an algae in it, but it would still have a PLA binder. So it's kind of like a little lesser of two evils. So there's kind of some Frankenstein PLAs. We just found a new company that is, you can actually send your kind of spaghetti PLA waste to them, and they melt it all down and then send it back to you in a filament. So we're gonna try that out. We have a new grant called Eco Makerspace, and we just put a paper, we just presented a paper at the International Makerspace conference that was at UC Berkeley last month. So we're kind of documenting more sustainable ways for makerspaces to happen. We've been interviewing makerspace directors from all over the world. So we'll keep publishing in that topic because I think it is really important. But some of these filaments do clog up the nozzles, and there's challenges. So there's people are trying out more of the larger paste printers because they don't clog as much. Actually, Emil, you've worked with clay 3D printing. Do you want to talk about what you guys have done at Anderson Ranch?
Yeah, I mean, we've pretty much only done printing with clay, various different types of clay, but what's really cool about the Potter bots is you can kind of put anything in them. It's just basically a syringe with a piston. So anything that you can fit in there, I've heard of people like printing, like paste made of coffee ground. I've heard people like putting, like chocolate in it. I've heard of toothpaste. I talked to, the team at 3D Potter and I asked them what the weirdest thing they had heard of, and it was toothpaste. Toothpaste was hands down the thing we didn't expect the most.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the coolest part. It's like super simple in mechanics, so it's really versatile and you can kind of experiment with them. But we have 5 of them and we run workshops with them, so we end up doing clay vessels. You're kind of limited by what fits in the tube, so you can start to get vessels like maybe this big, and that's kind of the limit with those. But there are some people who are making like continuous feed clay 3D printers. There's Del Harrow, who's a ceramicist and professor in Fort Collins. He builds his own 3D printing machines with like an auger attached to it and attached to like a pug mill, which mixes the clay, so he can continuously feed clay into it and print as big as the scaffolding of his machines that he builds allows. So his name's Del Harrow. I don't know how to spell it. DELHARROW. So there's like a lot of potential for those machines, and I think the technology for it is developing really fast because of like the concrete side of things, because the technology for like the Potter bots and the technology for like concrete printing is so similar. And then industries are wanting to use the concrete like as soon as possible. So I think that technology is developing pretty fast.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's Ron Real, there's studios at UC Berkeley. There's a guy named Simone who's doing more concrete and trying to do the roof of the 3D printing with like lightweight. Yeah, there's Adobe. Ron Real studio does Adobe, and also in Colorado. But Anderson Ranch teaches clay 3D printing classes. So Emil's the director of their Fab Lab. So get Emil's in contact if you want to learn how to clay 3D print in Colorado. Yes.
I feel like we kind of blew over a really great announcement about the material library.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to hear more about that.
Let's stuff that in.
What the plan is and.
Yeah, LD,
and
take
more
the
about like
floor.
material libraries and what you guys are offering.
Let's see. LD, you want to talk more about your vision?
Yeah, so the ecomaterials library just got this grant recently, last semester. And the idea is that we can have different prototyping materials, like things that the students and like the whole, it's not just for Atlas, it's like, it will be a CU resource. For students from undergrad, grad, that can like come up with their own materials, formulations if they want, or learn how to make bio-based materials, or maybe even like get to know what is commercially available. Because some companies exist and they do provide, for instance, alternatives to MDF, to laser cut, or alternatives to other composites for using the CNC machine. So it will provide those resources for students. There will be like one part of the project that will be also getting people involved, how to make materials, like from bioplastics to biocomposites. It will mainly, I think, the categories we will have will be bioplastics, biocomposites, and just maybe a few other just like projects from the research that's happening here. But the focus is prototyping materials, which is slightly different from the one that we have in UC Davis, because their program has also like fashion or people doing more like product design. So it's like a slightly different, but this one was pitched more for like prototyping materials. And like, yes, we need hands obviously for people to help make the material samples, because a lot of them need to be made. And that's why the workshops are for, is so the participants could then come up with their own iterations and like contribute to the library with their samples. And downstairs in the VTU, it will be hosted with like tools and materials, so you don't have to buy it. The idea is that you can use like the funds are also having probably like the first stage equipped with materials for students to use, so you don't have to get it out of their pocket.
I have for these new materials, I kind of wonder, how do you begin evolving the guidelines and recommendations for like, can you laser cut this? Like,
Mhm.
Or like, how do you CNC this? So when you have these totally novel materials, have you folks been also developing paradigms for like how to determine best practices to prototype with them?
Yeah, I would say that many times this goes hand in hand with research. So I just like, part of my PhD is everything related to sustainability applied to smart textiles, but I do make my own materials. So as part of like the work dissemination, it's if I'm laser cutting something and documenting everything and just have it available, and there will be like a website also paired with the physical library, in which it will give instructions, for instance, if I've already tested these bioplastics and how to laser cut them in this specific, power, speed and frequency, it will be documented there. And the idea is that it could also motivate students to document those things, because otherwise like that knowledge gets lost. Yeah, and I guess that's why there are not so many like readily available commercial composites or things like that are bio-based, because they have to go through like the research and development process. But something nice about institutions like here is that research and design and practice happens the same way.
And I'll just say, over the last like 7 years, I've seen LD make mycelium and compress it so that it's more safe to laser cut without having a fire. If it's too kind of smushy with air, then it would catch on fire. So there are ways and tricks that research students are developing to make it safer. But just yesterday, you were laser cutting bioplastic with chitin and laser cutting it for weaving. So it maybe is happening in all these labs, and it's slowly getting published. But I think the material library is a way to also share the settings for etching bioplastics. So it's easier.
Early in my prototyping adventures, I tried to make a book safe on a laser cutter. Don't.
This
Do
can
that.
it can go bad. Yeah,
It can go bad.
anyone that works or manages a makerspace can say it can go bad.
And related to that, and before you were talking about all these companies that go out of business, to what extent is, the process, the scalability, the things like that, how does that become a part of the educational process so that we think about it as we go? versus,
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
if it's like a so what after a while, right?
Well, I think part of the kind of vision LD and I had years ago, and why we've been able to kind of scale the project with Green Fund grants at different institutions, is because the DIY recipe is there. So the student doesn't have to hope the business hasn't gone out. We're making these recipes available, so you can just 4 grams of tapioca, 6 grams of fiber. So we're making it so the open source recipes are a part of the library, so you don't have to send $90 to Switzerland. You can actually just whip it up with $3 worth of ingredients. So, but that said, I would say biomaterials are going nowhere. Like, they're exploding. There's the biodesign competition that happens at MoMA in New York, and there's great institutions from around the world contributing. There's a biodesign conference happening at TU Delft next August, and papers are being accepted this winter. So many conferences. LD and I are putting a paper together for the Design Research Society. I would say that sustainable materials and making some of the processes more open and available, and startups are getting a ton of traction. I've gone to Dutch Design Week and London Design Week, and there's like whole buildings dedicated to sustainable materials. So we might not feel it like in the West, but in Europe, it is just like all people are doing is whipping up the stuff in their labs and kitchens. So I still feel hopeful about it. But that said, there can be a graduate student startup, and it doesn't get fully funded, or as some of our research funding is less available in the United States, maybe there's more funding in the European Union, like we could hope. But back to why I think the DIY part of it is the most empowering part of it for now. And I think my students are wanting more sustainable materials, so if they're able to contribute to the research to make them more readily available, it's the best we can do now. There's also, let's not laser cut plexiglass, let's laser cut recycled cardboard. Like, there's ways to also have a lab lower hanging fruit that's less plastic.
Could you say more a little bit of like curricula? Because like many times I think it's connected to classes and like projects, capstone projects, or how is it working at UC Davis?
Great question. So we've co-taught the sustainable design class at UC Davis. So I have a assignment where students have to make their own eco materials and they have to kind of document the process. So they start by like speculating what the material could do. They mix it up, they dehydrate it, it gets moldy, they throw it away, they make it again. They figure out constraints, they're documenting, how many grams, they're weighing the materials, and then they're kind of riveting it together or sewing it together for the final prototype, but going through that documentation process. So in our ISAM paper on the eco material library, I kind of explained some of that curriculum. But students love it, and it kind of feels like a home ec classroom with blenders going and the dehydrator on full blast. But going also to craft schools at Haystack Mountain, we worked with the basket making class this summer, and those students were biofabricating their own materials for basket weaving. There's ways to kind of integrate it. Emil, you've had biodesign, you had Fiona Bell teach this summer.
Yeah, I wasn't super involved with that class, but I walked through a couple times. And they just had so many different materials and every student was like trying new things. And they were making lamps, so they were like designing lampshades, and that was the biomaterial aspect of that class. It was primarily like that, the woodworking class. Really cool.
Great, so I'm seeing, also craft schools are interested in bringing biomaterials and setting up these libraries and setting up kind of experts from around the world to come and do these workshops. So that's another example of like how I think there's a buzz, and it's not going, it's amplifying, not necessarily getting dim, but there's a lot of experimentation, a lot of mess, but the mess can all be composted. So I think that's a nice part of it. How many of us have like a guilty bin of PLA prototypes gone wrong? So that's kind of fun.
Professor,
Yes.
First of all, thank you for your presentation. It's been wonderful to sit and listen. I just wanted to ask you one thing. The process that you touched on really has been the creative side of it. I'm just curious, any of the programs or workshops that have been given, is there any kind of economics or sustainability piece to those programs? And sort of in a related note, I'll just say, as an electrical engineer, the stuff that you were doing at the BART stop and with the folks at Austin Energy, we should definitely talk.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, what it comes down to is there's some things you should know before that piece of your portfolio grows.
Yeah.
At least in the States, anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I wear two very different hats, and the first 10 years of my career was running my own design studio, doing solar charging stations for cities. I didn't even mention I did a whole suite of charging stations for music festivals. I went to the biggest US music festival, South by Southwest, Bonnaroo, Coachella, doing solar charging stations with little gas pumps. So there's kind of like an interesting way to integrate renewable energy. We have the World's Fair from 100 years ago, right? Showing like more modern kitchens so we can save time. I think music festivals have become the more modern World's Fair, where a lot of sustainability initiatives have happened at music festivals or arts festivals. So I think there's a nice connection there.
speaking of nice connections, Pecan Street, Austin Energy.
Yeah.
That would be a wonderful place to take something.
Yeah, I was a graduate student doing that project. It's a fantastic project, the initiative with renewable energy. I work at the Institute of Transportation Studies at UC Davis, and also I'm a faculty on the energy grad group. So I do wear this other hat that's very interested in forward thinking green energy adoption, and there's a lot of great research at where am I? UC Davis for that kind of work, and I was able to bring that research from UT Austin.
For what it's worth, the comment I made.
Yeah.
In the real world, things happen a lot differently, and to be quite blunt about it, the electric utility industry as a whole, you get all of these variations of cooperation.
Exactly.
In that world, and some of that is hard to see some.
It's been a wild ride, like paying attention to solar energy. There's been good years where you almost like were paid money to put solar panels on your roof, you got like a check. And then there's bad years where it's like, oh no, it's gonna be 60,000 to put this array.
Okay, sorry, there's a question there, there's a question online.
Okay,
I'll be quick.
Okay.
In the same vein, it sounds like you've gotten a lot done in a public works domain as a designer, and I'd love to know more about what it's like to be, you working with urban planners and with city governments and stuff like that.
Yeah, I think I just took people by surprise. I think as a woman designer, but to be able to sit at a table with Austin Energy and be like, I have a vision. And then they're like, let's see the rendering, do it. So I partner with another industrial designer in Dallas, and I think our kind of yin and yang of confidence has also helped to sit in these kind of city meetings, convincing the planners at UT Austin. We set up 2 solar charging stations that were up for 10 years at UT Austin. They're like, little lady, this looks like a wild project. But then I was able to charm them and get them on board. So, there's definitely been some like cliffs of like, what just happened? But for the most part, people do want to see solar mobility, and who's hates sitting in traffic. So I think the project just like caught everyone's heart at the right time. Like the first prototype came out in 2009 when I was an MFA student. So I didn't tell the long story, is I bought an electric scooter when they were very uncool, and it was $200, and someone had adapted this like very uncool electric scooter to have a little solar panel. And it was on, Craigslist, and then I was like, wait, what? One solar panel could charge my electric bike? And it was the 2007 there was an oil crisis that year, and people were buying bikes. So I realized one solar panel could charge my bike, and I just thought Texas didn't have e-bike charging stations in 2007. But then fast forward, my MFA is a plan for cities to install e-bike networks. 2007. And so what do you got? Who got here on an e-bike, a shared e-bike? So I think designers that are like forward thinking, that was like a speculative project, but now they're all over the world. So I study, a lot of my research I didn't mention is studying micromobility. So I've gotten a lot of research grants at the Institute of Transportation Studies to look at trends. In 2017, Bird and Lyft and Uber just dumped e-bikes and scooters on every corner, no regulation, no safety. Little thin scooters people were like hitting sidewalk, signs with, but they proved that people did want to give up driving their urban vehicles into cities. So that's been a wild ride to, litigation between Lyft and Uber and, this and that, and some systems are stronger than others, but we have Spin right now at UC Davis that's really popular. So I have published a lot of papers on researching micromobility trends, and have a new paper coming out next month on the safety of e-bikes and scooters and like batteries and the vehicle safety. I've talked to designers of the Uber and now what's known as Spin vehicles. The lawyers helped beef up those vehicles because they were like, if you look at the 2017 fleets, they were these tiny little scooters. But through safety, we were able to make the wheels 10 inches and they can take bumps. So the vehicles we take for granted now, industrial design has a big role in making these vehicles safer. So my perspective as an industrial designer and also systems thinker of like, how do we charge them? How are they connected? Has, been something I published greatly on. So that's my perspective as a researcher versus like trying to manage these fleets, which is like really wild systems, but they're here to stay. And I think maybe one of the benefits of micromobility shared fleets is it's been the kind of gateway drug for people to buy their own e-bike and scooter. So post-pandemic, tons of people are, e-mobility is here to stay, and those are less vehicle drivers, those are less fossil fuel users. So I stay hopeful in that experience of being part of it.
We run out of time, but the question online from Jessica is, I'm curious to know how you might integrate design theory and connection to social movements and politics into the curriculum. I think you're already doing it, so.
Yes. Making this stuff visible, like working with museums and galleries and conferences, and just making the students have the tools to implement their own prototypes and start their own startups and companies. Back to the business end, in graduate school, I was part of the, I took a lot of entrepreneurship classes, and that's why I was able to put business plans together. The Southwest by Southwest Festival microfinance, the start of my studio. They helped me get to festivals. So these kind of creative partnerships as a, you know, a design studio founder, working with cities and festivals, has helped get this project going, and, you know, get press, but also inspire other people to, you know, don't graduate and look for a job. Make your own business to have a job.
Yes.
No one would have hired me to work at their urban planning studio. I just made work that people didn't ignore, and then they wanted to commission me to, you know, what can you do for BART? What can you do for Sacramento? What can you do at Davis? So maybe that's my final pep talk. Thank you.